All right, now we're ready to install our new carburetor. I want you to take note of something first though. Edelbrock carburetors are what they call a square bore carburetor. What we took off was a quadrajet carburetor, which is a spread bore. If we try and just install our new carburetor with just a standard gasket, you can see clearly right here we're going to have vacuum problems and that this gasket does not fit this intake manifold. So what we're going to use is an adapter plate. This right here adapts square bore carburetors to quadrajet manifolds, and without this you're going to have nothing but troubles. You're going to have all kinds of vacuum leaks. Just so you know what a square bore manifold looks like in case you do have one, they look like this. And of course the gasket fits very nicely. Now our adapter kits come complete. They come with the adapter plate, the necessary gaskets, and all the mounting hardware. So we're going to go ahead and put this on. Start with the gasket. And of course this has got to go down on the correct way in the manifold. And we're going to install the mounting screws. When you're tightening these, don't cinch one down and then the others. Just snug them up a little bit first, and then go around to each one and just give it a little tighter and a little tighter until it's nice and snug. All right, next we're going to install the 4 mounting studs. Now we install the top gasket. And we're ready to drop the carburetor on. But before you do, just kind of give it a once over. Make sure there's no packing debris inside or anything like that. And take note that there's a vacuum port on the back side. Now the front side is for the PCV valve. The back side is for power brakes. Now our car here uses power brakes coming off the intake manifold, so we're not going to be using this port. So you want to be sure you block that off. You're going to have a huge vacuum leak. Included with the carburetor, you get a bag with all kinds of little parts in it. And included in the parts is the plug for this back port here. I've put a little thread sealer on there. Once that's done, we're ready to drop it on. Now we're ready to install the washers and the nuts. Once those are all on, we give them a snug down with a wrench. And again, don't just cinch down on one and not the others. Just go around evenly and give them all a little bit of hand tightness. And sometimes it's a good idea to go in a cross pattern and just a little tighter each time until they're snug down. Now the carburetor's on, we're ready to do the fuel lines. Well, the first thing we want to do is get rid of the old fuel line. They get old, dry, and cracked, and you're just asking for a leak. So we're going to get rid of that first. Now to help make your installation go smooth and easy, we offer a universal fuel line kit. It's a part number 8135. And what comes in this kit is a fuel filter. We have the rubber fuel line. We have 2 different size ferrule fittings to go onto your existing steel line coming from your fuel pump. We have a 5/16 and a 3/8, and of course all the hose clamps that you'll need. We do offer a filter with 2 different sizes of nipples on it for 5/16 or 3/8. Now the trick is, you don't want to try and take a 5/16 fuel line and shove it on the carburetor as hard as you can and try and get it on there. All you're doing is ballooning this out, and you're just asking for a fuel leak. Fuel leak and a hot exhaust don't mix real good. You're asking for a barbecue. So make sure you're using the right size fuel lines for your vehicle. Now this car is equipped with a 3/8 steel fuel line coming from the fuel pump. So we selected a 3/8 ferrule fitting that's supplied in the kit. And basically these are just a nipple for the rubber fuel line to attach to and a crush sleeve inside that seals around the steel fuel line. So we start by taking the nut and ferrule assembly, slipping it over the steel fuel line. Make sure it's on good. Then we simply screw in the fitting. And then give it a good cinch down. And that'll prevent any leaks. Now that's ready to go. Now our Edelbrock carburetors come with a fuel fitting, comes straight out the side. This is standard equipment. And we can take the fuel line and stick it on here. Just because we give you 2 or 3 feet of fuel line doesn't need to use all of it. So let's cut it to size, and we're going to do something a little more than this. Rather than use this fitting, we offer what we call a banjo fitting. It's a 90-degree banjo fitting, number 8089. And what this does is it lets us reroute the fuel line to a little better angle. Now what comes in the kit is a banjo fitting and a couple of gaskets. So what we're going to do is place a gasket on one side, put the fitting on, and place the second gasket on the other side. Now it's ready to install. And we'll just give that a little cinch. You don't want to over tighten these. Just good and snug. It's plenty fine. Now we'll be able to route the fuel line up underneath and straight up in. So we're going to cut it to size. Install a new clamp. Put it on and give it a tighten. Now you want to be sure that your fuel line doesn't interfere with any linkages over here. Ours goes underneath and around and doesn't interfere with anything. So that's all nice and routed really good. Something very important about installing a new carburetor, our Edelbrock carburetors do not have built-in fuel filters. Some OEM carburetors and even some aftermarket carburetors have filters built in. And I can't stress enough how important a fuel filter is. You've got old rust scale in the gas tank, you've got old fuel lines, sometimes they rust, sometimes the neoprene lines disintegrate and little pieces come out. And you really need to filter that stuff out, because if it gets in the carburetor, it'll cause the needle and seats inside to get clogged up, and the fuel won't be able to shut off, and it just starts flooding all over the place. So we really need to install a good fuel filter. Now mind you, before we start, fuel filters are directional. So if you look on the end of it, it'll say in on one side, and there's nothing on the other. So it lets you know that this side is the inlet. So when we place it in there, we want to be sure that the fuel pump is flowing this way to the carburetor. So we'll come in and find a place on the fuel line here to place this fuel filter. I kind of like this spot right here. Now in your car you might find another location, but this for our car, this is a nice spot. Here's the inside. And just make sure that tuck's out of the way so it doesn't interfere with any linkage or any electrical items or anything like that, and everything should be good. Now that the fuel line's taken care of, we can do the vacuum lines. I went ahead and replaced the vacuum advance line because the old line's pretty cracked and we're just asking for a vacuum leak if we don't. Now this particular vacuum advance uses ported, or what they call timed vacuum. And the way we can tell that on a carburetor is if you're looking at the ports on the front, one is slightly higher than the other. If you look at this one, it's a little bit lower. This one's slightly higher on the carburetor. We're going to use the one that's slightly higher because that's above the throttle plates, which is ported, or what they call timed vacuum. The other one we're not going to use. Now this is manifold vacuum. This car right here is a manual transmission car, so we don't need a vacuum line going down to the transmission's modulator valve. So we're just going to plug that off. Well, included with your carburetor is this little goodie package, and it has little extra goodies in there. throttle balls, stud for the air cleaner, an air cleaner gasket, and some wire when we hook up the electric choke. So we're going to take one of the vacuum line plugs. We're just going to plug that one off. And then we have the PCV port right here, so we're just going to plug the PCV line in. We're going to reuse this line right here because it's fairly new. Now our vacuum lines are hooked up. Now we're ready to hook up the throttle linkage. Now Edelbrock carburetors are compatible with most styles of throttle linkages. In with the parts bag that you get with your carburetor, they also include the little ball and nut and washer for the GM applications. So we're going to go ahead and install that. Once that's nice and snug, now we can re-snap our throttle linkage in. And you want to check for full travel. Make sure you have a good, smooth, full travel. No binding or anything like that. And then most importantly, install a new return spring. This thing's really important and you want to make sure you got a good one on there. All right, now we're ready to hook up the electric choke. Now in the parts bag that comes with your carburetor, you'll have a couple of wires, a black one and a red one. The black one is the ground and it's already set up for you with the correct spade terminal on it. So if we go down to the choke, we plug this into the spade terminal and we can just simply ground it right to the housing of the choke terminal. So just take one of these out here. There's our ground source. Now all we have to do is hook a switched 12-volt source to activate the choke. Now here's what you don't want to do. Some people will tell you, oh, just hook it to the positive side of the coil. That's not a good idea because this is basically a flat wound spring in there that heats up, kind of like a direct short. What you don't want to do is take that drain and put it on your ignition system. Now some other people say, oh, hook it to the alternator. You don't want to do that either. Really what you want to do is get up underneath the dash, get on your fuse panel, and plug into a place that says keyed accessory. And that's where we're going to take it from. Okay, once we've hooked into the accessory side of the fuse box, we run our wire up through, bring it on in, and plug it right into the positive side of the choke. Now we've got power feed to the choke. Well, now that everything's hooked up, we're ready to fire this thing up. What we first need to do, though, is get some fuel from the fuel pump inside the carburetor so we can be able to start the motor. So the easiest thing to do is just crank the engine over for 10 or 15 seconds to prime the inside of the carburetor. Well, right when it's ready to fire up, it's a good idea to have a buddy get inside the car so you can kind of watch the carburetor, make sure you don't have any fuel leaks or anything like that right upon initial startup. Well, that looks really good. Now keep in mind, your Edelbrock carburetor comes right out of the box pretty much ready to go, but because there's so many different types of engines out there and different applications, you might need to do a little bit of extra tuning. We're going to show you how to do that. Okay, well, we've already run this and checked for leaks. We had no fuel leaks, so we went ahead and ran it and got it to standard operating temperature. Now we're ready to adjust the air-fuel mixture screws. And I'm going to show you that real quick. That's these two screws right here. One operates one side of the carburetor, one operates the other. Now these only affect an idle. Anything above an idle, these don't work. Okay, so some people say, I'm going to richen up my carburetor. If you screw these out, you're opening up the needle and seat inside and allowing more fuel and air to go in at an idle. But it doesn't affect normal driving. Okay, now there's two ways to adjust these. When the engine's running, you can adjust them by putting a screwdriver in here and screwing it in until you're hearing the idle drop. As soon as it starts to drop, you say, okay, now it's starting to work and it's cutting the air and fuel off. So you start to back it out a little bit, give it about another quarter to a half a turn, and you're set. Then do the same thing to the other. Now that sets on the lean side of running. So if you want economy for running around town, you start, screw it in. So you're going to go clockwise with it. You're going to screw it in until the idle drops and then back it back out until you get the highest possible idle, and then you're set, and then do the same thing to the other. Now if you have a more of a performance car and you're going to want to be on the rich side, then do the opposite. Start screwing it out first, go counterclockwise with it to allow more fuel and air in there, and when it starts running rough, then go back in another half turn or so and then set it, and then do the same to the other side. So we're going to do that here. This is an economy car. It's just a stock little 327 in here. We're just going to do it for the economy side. So we'll go ahead and fire it up. Fire it up. There's the idle drop. So we're going to back it up. Do the same to this side. You hear the idle drop down. Now we're just going to adjust the regular idle. And we're set. All right, when you're done with your installation, be sure to top off your new carburetor with a great looking Edelbrock air cleaner. This one right here is a model 1221. It's specifically designed to fit your new carburetor. Of course, we have other models to choose from too, and you can check those out online on our website at www.edelbrock.com. If you have any other tech questions, you can give our tech line a call too at 1-800-416-8628.